Before the break, we spoke to two scientists supported by NCI through extramural grants during their graduate work. Now I'm delighted to welcome Megan Mayocha, a graduate student who's doing her PhD research in a lab at the NCI. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm really happy to be here today.
Megan, you're talking to us through interpreters today. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, I'll explain that briefly. I have two sign language interpreters who are working with us currently. One interpreter is going to be speaking for me. She will be my voice while I sign, and the other interpreter will be signing for Oliver.
Great. So Megan, I'm always curious to learn what draws people to do science. How did that happen for you?
I've always been very fascinated with science ever since I was a little girl. When I was in middle school and high school, that's when I really started to take extra science credits that weren't necessary for my degree because I was just so fascinated with the science world. I was interested in forensics, anatomy, really the whole gamut, the whole range of the scientific field. But I wasn't sure what exactly it was that I was interested in. I did always find myself curious about everything and wanting to know the reasoning behind everything. What is the explanation for this? I would Google things. I would Google why something happened. I would always ask my parents why, everything. I needed to know the reason behind it. And so I guess there's always been a little bit of a scientist within me. When I got into college and I had to pick my major and figure out what I wanted to focus on, I had picked biology. As time went on, I really became fascinated with genetics. But there's a lot that can be done when you do genetic research. And I wasn't sure what exactly I wanted to do with that interest of mine. So I decided to go ahead and apply for a post-bac opportunity here at NCI. And this was right after I had finished my undergrad in college. And that's when I fell into the cancer genetic research world. And that's where I'm at currently.
So what prompted you to do a post-bac?
So when I graduated college, I had my mindset that I had wanted to go to medical school. I wanted to become a gynecologist. However, when I was looking into medical school, it was a very in-depth application process that I wasn't quite ready for yet. And I knew that there would be many different opportunities other than just medical school. So I wasn't sure where exactly I wanted to go. So my Gallaudet advisor had suggested that I should apply for a post-bac opportunity here at NIH, and that's what I did.
So an opportunity to experience research.
Yes, correct, yes. During college, I only had one outer lab experience or internship experience. I did have many other opportunities with wet labs. I didn't have many opportunities with wet labs, but I did with qualitative research. So I needed more wet lab bench work experience. And that's what led me to taking advantage of the position and the opportunity here to gain that experience.
So I'm going to guess you liked it because you signed up for a PhD.
Yes. Really, I fell into it quite quickly. And after several months of my post-bac, I went ahead and I applied for my PhD. Well, I wasn't quite sure what field I wanted to go into, whether it was cancer biology or human genetics. So I applied for both programs. And then I decided that I would pick the Georgetown NIH Partnership Program, which is a field of tumor biology.
Yeah, so you mentioned the partnership program. Obviously, NIH, NCI are not universities. They cannot give you a degree. So your degree is coming from Georgetown, but you chose to do your research in a lab at NCI.
Yes. It's a very unique program that is offered here in partnership with Georgetown. I didn't know about this program until I saw a few other graduate students in my lab. I work in Dr. Kent Hunter's lab, and there were 2 grad students who were involved in the GPP, that's the Graduate Partnership Program. When I was able to see them involved in that, I became really interested in the program because I really enjoy working here at NCI. The accessibility is fantastic. The research here is just top notch. And so I decided to apply to Georgetown because they do have NIH has a few partnerships with a few different universities, but I had picked Georgetown University. All of my class course credits I took at Georgetown. And my lab rotations were a mixture between Georgetown labs as well as NIH labs. And then I picked a lab here at NIH to continue my thesis research.
So what's it like being a grad student on the NIH campus?
Really, it's just the perfect opportunity being a student here. The research is very quick moving. There are amazing resource opportunities here. And the interpreting accessibility. Well, another reason I did pick this program, I should add in specifically at NIH, is because of the accessibility. It's guaranteed accessibility with highly qualified interpreters that are available on campus here. So my experience has been really amazing thus far.
I'm going to ask, what are you researching? What's your focus of your thesis work?
I am currently researching a more in-depth mechanism of a very poorly characterized gene in estrogen receptor negative breast cancer metastasis. And so I'm analyzing how this gene impacts metastasis and what the mechanisms are behind the gene that are affecting the metastasis.
That sounds like a really important project. The metastatic breast cancer, particularly estrogen receptor negative, is a tough disease.
Yes. And it's there's very poor treatments available for this disease, and we need to improve the current availability of these treatments.
Now, you mentioned the availability of skilled interpreters as one of the reasons you chose this program. You've also been advocating in that area. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yes. So when I was in my postbac here, I really didn't work with many interpreters prior to my postbac because I went to Gallaudet University, which had complete communication access. My professors all signed, my peers all use sign language, so I didn't need an interpreter during my undergrad. So when I got here, I wasn't sure what to expect. Kent Hunter's lab already had a deaf biologist working here, and he's been here for quite a long time. So he had already established a team of scientific interpreters that he had been working with for many years and had developed over time. So as I joined the lab, I saw how the interpreters picked up the scientific sign language. And many interpreters who work here have worked here for a very long time. So they're knowledgeable about what our lab research does, the vocabulary that comes up, as well as our language needs and preferences. When I left my postbac and I went to grad school, I couldn't bring the interpreters who worked here with me because they were already in the lab with the biologists working. So it was really tough to look for scientific interpreters. I didn't know who else knew science. So I was kind of stuck in a position and I was asking around and nobody seemed to have any recommendations for me. For grad school, my one request was that I had consistent interpreters. I wanted interpreters who were available to interpret for me every single day. I didn't want one interpreter for one day, another interpreter for the next day, and have that constant turnover of interpreters in my classes. So the consistency was better because the interpreters were then able to pick up the language and learn as we went on. So I was able to find 2 interpreters that worked with me consistently through my schooling. Both of them did not know science prior to working with me. They had no scientific background, but they were able to pick up the language and learn with a positive attitude and the motivation to learn my language and to learn the science directly from me as well as from internet resources. So we've worked with each other for about 4 years now, and they are considered scientific interpreters because they know how to interpret science.
Yeah, one thing I learned from reading up on this area from the materials you've also shared with the community is that I guess there are not necessarily signs for scientific terms that are developed yet, right? So new vocabulary hasn't yet been included into the American Sign Language. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. There are a lot of scientific terminologies that need to be fingerspelled, which can be very difficult to spell out everything. So we have developed our own signs to go with the words. We call them our lab signs that make sense to the people within our lab. But we are open to changing those signs if we learn something that's better, maybe from another deaf scientist anywhere in the country. But in general, deaf scientists have been developing STEM-based sign language dictionaries over the last several years. And it's getting better and better every day. It's slow moving, but it's getting better.
So are there essential resources that have been created?
Yes. I plan to share that for the ending part of the segment.
Okay, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but it sounds like a real challenge, right?
Yes. But it's very rewarding as well.
And Megan, I understand that you also are interested in science communication in general, right? You write for a blog called Oncobytes.
Yes. Yes, that's correct. Let me think. I started writing for them when I first started grad school. In my first year or two, I realized that there was a gap between the research and public knowledge, especially with the deaf community. There aren't many information resources available within sign language. They're all written in English. And the deaf community likes to see both the ASL as well as the written English, and they want to have both available to them. So that's when I started to realize and kind of get into the field of communication of science within the deaf community, but not exclusively the deaf community, for a general audience. With the in-depth specific terminology specifically related to cancer research, there's a lot of large words or words that the general public just aren't familiar with. And so I saw an opportunity arise with Oncobytes, which is a small group of scientists, patients, advocates, and really anyone within the cancer field can write an article for Oncobytes based off of their specialty in lay terms, so everyone can understand. So I just started writing for them last year. I've written a few articles for them, sharing my knowledge and practicing my science communication skills, which I've really enjoyed.
Megan, I'm curious, this just occurred to me, but there's a revolution in artificial intelligence going on. And one of the things that these new technologies are able to do is to take large amounts of data and summarize them and make them more digestible. I wonder, how is that being received in the deaf community? And are there technologies being developed to make it easier for people who cannot sign to communicate with deaf people?
Yes and no. So technology is still not perfect. We still need interpreters to communicate. That's the best approach for communication. But for example, with the iPhone, I believe Android as well, but the iPhone has live captioning features. that will automatically set up. For example, if I run into somebody who's hearing and they are speaking, they can speak to my phone and write out a transcript for me, and I can text back to them. However, that's not the best approach, but it is slightly improving every day. So I think so, yes.
But I mean, you said earlier that deaf people prefer to see sign language or signing, if I'm saying that right.
Yes, so we are bilingual. We know English as well as ASL. So it's nice to see everything in ASL as well as English. Written English is typically not the first language for deaf people because we learn sign language first. So ASL is our native language. So it's just natural to us. To have access to both is to have accessibility to everybody in the community.
That makes sense. I guess there's a lot more work yet to be done.
Yes. However, work does tend to move pretty quickly as things get developed and there's new inventions. It's always fast moving.
Great. I'm curious, what's next for you? How far are you through your graduate school?
Yes, I'm about to start my 5th year. I can't believe it.
So where are you headed next, or are you not sure about that yet?
I'm still unsure of what I'm doing next. I have 2 pathways that I really love doing. The first is I wouldn't mind continuing with research. I wouldn't mind actively researching and continuing that field, as well as the science communication, as we've talked about. And more related to consultations, as well as project management within science communication, or grant writer, or scientific writer of some sort. I'm not really sure. I'm still investigating what opportunities there are for me.
Well, I think we need qualified scientists in all these different areas. So I hope you have a chance to explore those options.
Yes, me too. I'm excited to continue to explore these options.
I mean, we in the Center for Cancer Training, where I work, we provide some opportunities for grad students and postdocs on campus to learn a little bit about these different career paths. I hope you've had a chance to make use of those.
Yes. I'm planning to go to the Career Center Symposium very soon, and I'm looking forward to that.
Great. Finally, then, I just wonder what advice you might have to our audience who are thinking about a career in cancer. What would you say to someone who was just a few years behind you?
I would advise them to take advantage of every opportunity that's presented to them. I would also tell them to stay flexible and to have resiliency. Things are going to change. The unexpected will happen. You're going to go through really tough as well as really good times, and just stay the course. And it's important to keep resilient and persevere through all of that.
Great. I think that's very good advice. Thank you. I could use that myself.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast and sharing your experiences and your work with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in the podcast. I'm honored to be here.
And Megan, as you know, at the end of our show, we always invite our guests to make recommendations about something interesting or cool that they'd like to share with the audience. We call this segment Your Turn, so I invite you to take your turn.
Yes. So I am excited to recommend Atomic Hands. The sign for that is what I just demonstrated, Atomic Hands. It's a small nonprofit organization that is established by 2 deaf women scientists. And it's an amazing resource for everyone. And their website is atomichehands.com. And it includes various different resources, including ASL STEM dictionaries, ASL STEM signs within ASL videos, ASL STEM news, so different events related to science and current events. And there are some small short clips of educational things explaining different science activities, what's going on behind them. It follows a different scientific process. So for example, climate change and how that happens, what the impact is currently, and all of it is done within sign language. So there's ASL as well as English. All of their videos are captioned. They're really fascinating to watch. They also include a large list of deaf STEM people. Well, people in STEM, scientists, educators, mathematicians, engineers. They have a list of different people with their bios as well as contact information, which I think is a really great resource that should be checked out.
That's such a great recommendation. We'll put a link in the show notes, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.